Edit your photos in the style of Dune. So the video we did in the past showing you how to color grade your photos in the style of a Wes Anderson film really struck a chord with you guys. So we decided to do another version of that, except this time we're gonna be covering the movie Dune. So let's jump in and see what sort of style we can emulate that was in that movie. Just like before, I'm gonna start by choosing a reference image. And the best way to match a certain style is to use a similar scene, so I picked a reference photo that closely resembles our own. Let's start with exposure adjustments and deal with colors later. Let's slightly increase the overall exposure and boost contrast a little bit. Since brightening the image is going to reduce contrast and further adjustments will reduce it even more. Let's decrease the lights and slightly increase shadows. All right, I think this is a pretty good starting point. And I think we can add a little bit of clarity as well as dehaze. And then let's compare what we have with the reference image. So my shadows are still a little bit too dark, so let's brighten those up and then compare them again. Okay, I think the exposure is pretty close now, so it's time to jump into some color work. At first glance, the reference image is less saturated, so let's lower the overall saturation significantly and compare them again. All right, I think that should do it. And let's refine saturation for each color separately. Let's start with white balance just to get the photo's base colors right, and then tweak the dominant colors individually. A good guideline here is the color of the sand. The reference image has a much more yellow-green tone. Okay, I'm gonna adjust to match that, so let's move temperature significantly towards warm tones, and then shift the tint back towards green. And now let's compare them again. Okay, I think we're getting there. Now let's refine each color separately. Let's start with yellows to define the color of the sand. And in color shift, I'm gonna select yellow, enable mask to see what's affected, and then fine tune the exact shade of sand so that it covers the entire area. All right, with the sand selected, let's lower saturation. Let's lower luminance a bit and then increase uniformity just to keep its color consistent across different exposure levels. And now let's compare them again. All right, something still feels off with the color of the sand, but that could be due to the added tint from exposure adjustments. So let's try shifting hue just 1 degree toward green and then compare. All right, so that actually makes it worse. So let's move back a step. Sometimes with color work, it's a good idea to kind of admit to yourself that we've gone too far or that there's some kind of mistake and just go back. So let's refine the color of the sand later when we're toning. Okay, so now we need to fix our skin tones. They've blended into the sand color, so we need to bring them back a bit just to match the reference image. And more importantly, make the subject stand out again. I've got another reference image with a close-up of the main subject, and we can see that just like in the first reference image, the yellows are a bit desaturated, but the oranges, including the skin tones, are quite saturated in comparison. Again, let's enable the mask, select the orange in the skin tones, and refine it as precisely as possible. Since I'm increasing saturation significantly, I don't want it to affect anything else. Now, once selected, I'm gonna increase saturation and then compare them again. All right, I think it's really starting to come together. So let's add our color tones using split toning. And let's start off with the lights, shifting them towards green to match that green-yellow tint. And let's check our reference image again. Okay, so we need to balance things out a bit. So let's move the shadows slightly towards yellow and move master towards orange. And what do we do next? Well, we compare them again, of course. And I think I overdid it with the oranges, so let's dial it back a bit. All right, let's compare it again. I think we're starting to get close. We just need to fine tune and balance things out. So I'm gonna go to Shift Primary Colors and shift red towards yellow and lower saturation. For the greens, I'm gonna move them slightly towards turquoise and reduce the saturation a lot in this case. Then I'm gonna move blue towards turquoise and lower its saturation as well. This creates those muted, desaturated tones across the entire photo. Okay, so the shadows still aren't green enough in the darkest areas, so let's use the tone curve to fix that. I'm gonna switch to linear mode so my adjustments affect only the darkest parts of the exposure. I'm gonna take the bottom point and increase green. Then I'm gonna add another point just slightly higher and lower it so that it barely reaches the center diagonal. And let's compare it again. Okay, we're getting closer even still, but I still want to remove the greenish tint from the sky as much as possible, and the sand is still a little bit too saturated and dark compared to the reference image. So let's go back to color shift, select the greens, enable mask, and adjust it to target the sky as much as possible. Then let's significantly lower saturation. Next, I'm gonna select yellows, reduce saturation, and increase luminance to make the sand look more kind of faded. And guess what? Let's compare them again. Okay, so the sky is still not there. I'm gonna try redefining the color and increase luminance to overexpose it just a little bit while further reducing saturation. And compare them again. All right, I think that's it. The sky has a greenish tint, but I don't want to touch color shift anymore. My goal here is to create a preset that works on multiple photos and not just this one. So let's fix this locally. Let's use the gradient filter, select the sky, and simply lower saturation. Okay, there we go. Now, I want the sky to be even brighter. So I'm gonna go back to exposure, increase lights, and we're done. Here's the before and after. And finally, because we're all done with this, I'm gonna save my adjustments as a preset. And I'm gonna open the preset list, click the plus icon, give it a name, and then add it to a folder like cinematic, or maybe we could just create a brand new one. Now, if you've made it this far, I'll let you in on a secret. There's a link to this preset in the video description, just in case you don't feel like creating it yourself. And I want to make sure this preset works on other photos, so let's go try it out. Okay, looks pretty dang good on plenty of other photos actually. All right, so now you know how to recreate a scene from the latest versions of the Dune movie. So I hope this was useful, gave you some more inspiration. Let us know in the comments below if there's another movie style that you want us to recreate, because we like doing these ones. I hope this was useful. Give us a thumbs up and hope to see you in the next video. And as always, subscribe so you never miss a video, and take care and happy editing. See you later.